Have you ever felt like there's something fundamentally wrong with you? Like everyone else received an instruction manual for life that somehow skipped your mailbox? You look around and see people who seem to have it all figured out, confident, comfortable in their own skin, moving through the world with an ease that feels completely foreign to you. And so you try harder. You adjust your personality depending on who's in the room. You rehearse conversations before they happen. You analyze every interaction afterward, wondering if you said the wrong thing, laughed too loud, or revealed too much. You've become a master of reading the room, shape-shifting to fit whatever you think is expected of you. Here's what I want you to know right now, before we go any further. There is nothing broken about you. What if I told you that this feeling of being too much or not enough isn't evidence of your inadequacy, but rather proof that you learned very early on that being yourself wasn't safe, that you absorbed messages, some spoken, most unspoken, that taught you to hide the brightest and most vulnerable parts of yourself? This isn't a story about what's wrong with you. This is a story about what happened to you, and more importantly, it's about what becomes possible when you finally understand the difference. We've been conditioned to pathologize ourselves, to believe that anxiety, people-pleasing, emotional shutdown, or chronic self-doubt are character flaws rather than adaptive responses to environments that couldn't hold our full humanity. We walk around carrying shame for the very mechanisms that once kept us safe, connected, or acceptable. But you're not broken, you were just taught to hide. And today, we're going to explore where those lessons came from, what they've cost you, how to recognize what you've been hiding, and most importantly, how to find your way back to yourself. Not to some idealized version of who you think you should be, but to the person you were before the world told you it wasn't okay to be them. Are you ready? Take a breath. This journey requires honesty, but I promise you, it also offers hope. Let's start at the beginning. Not your beginning necessarily, but the beginning of the hiding. Most of us don't remember the exact moment we learned to suppress ourselves. It wasn't typically a single traumatic event, though for some it was. For most, it was 1,000 small moments, a quiet accumulation of messages that taught us which parts of ourselves were acceptable and which needed to be locked away. Think back to childhood for a moment. Can you remember being told any of these things? Stop crying or I'll give you something to cry about. Don't be so sensitive. You're too loud. Why can't you be more like your sister? Big boys don't act like that. That's not ladylike. You're being dramatic. Stop showing off. Maybe you were a child who felt everything deeply, who cried easily, who needed more reassurance. And maybe you learned that those needs were inconvenient, burdensome, or shameful. So you stopped asking. You learned to swallow your tears, to minimize your needs, to become low maintenance. Or perhaps you were energetic and exuberant, full of ideas and questions and movement, and you were consistently told to sit still, be quiet, calm down. The message was clear. Your natural state was too much. So you learned to compress yourself, to take up less space, to dim your light so others would feel more comfortable. Some of us learned to hide our intelligence because being smart threatened others or made us targets for resentment. Some learned to hide our struggles because vulnerability was treated as weakness. Some learned to hide our joy because celebration felt unsafe in households where the emotional climate could shift without warning. The family system plays a profound role in shaping what we learn to hide. In families where parents were overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, or dealing with their own unhealed trauma, children often become expert emotion readers. They learn to assess the room, to manage the emotional states of adults, to become whatever is needed to maintain equilibrium. If you grew up in a home where anger was explosive, you might have learned to become invisible during conflict, to people please, to avoid having needs that might trigger upset. If you grew up with a depressed parent, you might have learned to become the happy one, the achiever, the child who never added to their burden. School added another layer of conditioning. Educational systems, for all their value, often reward conformity over creativity, compliance over curiosity. The kids who colored outside the lines, who asked too many questions, who learned differently, they were frequently labeled as problems rather than simply different. Peer dynamics taught us even more brutal lessons. Children can be merciless to those who don't fit neatly into predetermined categories, being bullied, excluded, or mocked for being different, whether that difference was appearance, interests, economic status, or simply the crime of being yourself, teaches us that authenticity comes with social consequences. And then there's the broader cultural conditioning. Messages about who deserves to take up space, whose voices matter, whose emotions are valid. If you grew up in a marginalized identity, whether based on race, gender, sexuality, disability, or any other axis, you received explicit and implicit messages about needing to modulate yourself to be acceptable to dominant culture. For women and femme-identifying people, the messages often center around being nice, accommodating, not too ambitious, not too sexual, not too opinionated. For men and masculine-identifying people, the messages often demand emotional stoicism, self-reliance, dominance, never showing weakness. Here's what's crucial to understand. Hiding yourself was not a character flaw. It was an intelligent adaptation to your environment. You learned to hide because, at some point, being seen fully felt dangerous. Dangerous to your physical safety, your emotional safety, your belonging, your worth. And so you developed sophisticated strategies to protect yourself while remaining connected to the people and systems you depended on. You created an acceptable self, a version of you that could navigate the world with minimal friction. And you tucked away the rest. Your anger, your needs, your desires, your fears, your gifts, your weirdness, your full emotional range. This was survival. This was adaptation. This was you doing the best you could with the developmental tools you had available. But here's the thing about childhood adaptations. They don't automatically update as we grow. We carry these protective strategies into adulthood, into relationships and workplaces and friendships where they may no longer serve us. Where, in fact, they actively prevent us from experiencing the connection and authenticity we desperately crave. Living in hiding comes with a price tag, and most of us don't calculate the full cost until we're already bankrupt. The most immediate cost is exhaustion. Maintaining a false self, constantly monitoring and adjusting your behavior, suppressing your genuine reactions. This requires enormous energy. It's like running software in the background of your mind at all times, draining your battery even when you think you're resting. Think about it, if you're constantly shape-shifting depending on context, you never get to just be. Every interaction requires performance. Every conversation demands that you check yourself. Am I being too much? Not enough? Did that land okay? Do they still like me? This hypervigilance is depleting. It's why you can feel exhausted after social interactions even when they went well. It's why you need so much time alone to recover. You're not actually introverted, you're just tired of performing. The emotional cost is equally significant. When you spend years suppressing certain emotions or experiences, you don't just suppress the negative ones. Emotional suppression doesn't work selectively. When you numb vulnerability, you also numb joy. When you shut down anger, you also shut down passion. When you hide your pain, you lose access to the full spectrum of your aliveness. Many people describe feeling emotionally flat or disconnected, going through the motions of life without really feeling present. This isn't depression necessarily, though it can certainly contribute to it. It's the natural consequence of spending so much energy managing and controlling your internal experience that you lose touch with it altogether. Then there's the relational cost. When you hide your true self, you can never fully receive love or acceptance, because the version of you that's being loved isn't actually you. It's the performance, the mask, the acceptable self you've constructed. This creates a painful paradox. You desperately want to be loved and accepted, so you hide the parts of yourself you fear are unlovable. But then when people do love you, it doesn't satisfy that deep hunger because you know they don't really know you. You're left feeling lonely even in connection, unknown even when surrounded by people. Authentic intimacy becomes impossible. You might have many friendships but feel none of them really see you. You might be in a long-term relationship but feel profoundly alone. Because true intimacy requires vulnerability, allowing yourself to be fully seen. And if you've learned that being fully seen is dangerous, you'll keep even your closest people at arm's length. The physical cost shouldn't be underestimated either. The body keeps the score, as the saying goes. Chronic stress from living inauthentically manifests in tension, pain, digestive issues, immune dysfunction, and various stress-related conditions. Your body literally holds the weight of everything you're carrying that has no outlet for expression. There's also an opportunity cost, the unlived life. How many experiences have you avoided because they felt too exposing? How many creative pursuits went unexplored because you might fail or be judged? How many relationships never formed because vulnerability felt too risky? How many versions of your life remained unlived because they required you to show up as yourself? And perhaps most tragically, there's the cost to your relationship with yourself. When you spend enough time performing, you can lose touch with who you actually are beneath the performance. You might struggle to answer simple questions. What do I actually want? What do I actually feel? What do I actually believe? You've become so skilled at reading others and adapting to external expectations that your internal compass has gone quiet. You look outside yourself for every decision, every opinion, every choice, because you've lost access to your own knowing. This creates a kind of existential crisis, a haunting sense that you're living someone else's life, that you're going through the motions but missing something essential. You might achieve all the right things, the degree, the job, the relationship, the house, and still feel empty because none of it emerged from your authentic desires. Here's the false promise that keeps us hiding. We believe that if we just perform well enough, if we just get it right, if we just become acceptable enough, then we'll finally be safe, loved, and at peace. But it's a lie. The safety that comes from hiding is not real safety. It's a prison where you're both the guard and the inmate. You've protected yourself right into isolation. So how do we begin to recognize what we've hidden? How do we excavate the parts of ourselves that got buried so long ago we've forgotten they exist? This recognition work requires honesty and gentleness in equal measure. We're essentially doing archaeology of the self, carefully brushing away layers of conditioning to reveal what's beneath. Start by noticing your patterns of self-editing. Pay attention to moments when you rehearse what you're going to say before speaking. Change your opinion based on what you think others want to hear. Minimize your accomplishments or downplay your struggles. Laugh along with jokes that actually hurt or offend you. Say I'm fine when you're decidedly not fine. Apologize excessively for taking up space or having needs. Check someone's reaction before deciding how you feel about something. These are all signs of the adapted self at work, the part of you that learned to constantly calibrate for external approval rather than internal truth. Notice also your emotional patterns. What emotions do you have easy access to, and which ones feel forbidden? Some people can express frustration but never sadness. Some can be cheerful but never angry. Some can show strength but never need. Each of us has a particular emotional range that feels permitted, and everything outside that range has been exiled. What happens in your body when certain emotions arise? Do you feel your throat tighten when tears come? Does your chest constrict with anger? Does anxiety spike when you consider expressing a need? These physical responses often point to emotions that were deemed unacceptable somewhere in your history. Consider the aspects of yourself you keep private. We all curate ourselves to some degree, But I'm talking about the parts of yourself you actively hide because you fear judgment, your interests and passions that others might find weird or silly, your ambitions that might be seen as too much or not enough, your struggles with mental health, addiction or trauma, your body and the shame you carry about it, your sexuality or gender identity, your spiritual beliefs or lack thereof, your creative expression, your need for help, support, or rest. What would happen if these hidden parts were revealed? What's the feared consequence? Rejection, ridicule, abandonment, punishment. These fears, often rooted in real past experiences, keep us locked in hiding even when present circumstances might be different. Here's a powerful reflection. Think about the feedback you've received throughout your life. What qualities or behaviors have you been criticized for? What earned disapproval, punishment, or withdrawal of love? Now consider, did you stop being that way, or did you just stop showing it? That child who was told they were too sensitive, did they become less sensitive, or did they just learn to cry in private? That teenager who was mocked for their enthusiasm, did they become less passionate, or did they just learn to perform indifference? That adult who was called selfish for having boundaries, did they stop having needs, or did they just stop expressing them? Often what we've hidden is not gone. It's simply been relegated to the basement of our psyche, still alive, still longing for expression, still influencing our behavior from the shadows. You might recognize what's been hidden by noticing what you're drawn to in others. We often admire in others the qualities we've suppressed in ourselves. If you're captivated by people who are unapologetically authentic, boldly creative, emotionally expressive, or confidently boundaried, it may be because these are aspects of yourself seeking recognition. Similarly, what triggers intense judgment or irritation in you? Sometimes our harshest judgments of others are projections of the parts of ourselves we've rejected. If someone's vulnerability makes you uncomfortable, it might be because your own vulnerability is tightly controlled. If someone's success triggers resentment, it might be because your own ambition has been hidden. Here's a gentle exercise. Imagine yourself at 7 years old. Picture that child clearly. What were they like before the world told them who to be? What did they love? What excited them? What did they dream about? How did they move through the world? Now ask, what happened to that child? Which parts of them are still alive in you, and which parts did you have to bury? This isn't about romanticizing childhood or pretending we should be childish as adults. It's about recognizing that many of our most authentic qualities, our creativity, our wonder, our emotional honesty, our unself-conscious joy, often get suppressed in the process of becoming acceptable adults. Another question to sit with: if you knew you were completely safe from judgment, rejection, or consequence, how would you live differently? What would you say? What would you do? Who would you become? The gap between that imagined life and your current life reveals the measure of your hiding. Recognition is essential, but it's only the beginning. The real work and the real freedom comes from gradually, courageously revealing what's been hidden. Let me be clear. This is not about suddenly becoming a completely different person or recklessly exposing yourself in unsafe situations. This is about a thoughtful, compassionate process of reconnecting with your authentic self and finding appropriate ways to express that authenticity. The foundation of this journey is self-compassion. You cannot shame yourself into authenticity. You cannot criticize yourself into wholeness. The voice that says, "Why did I waste so many years hiding? Why am I so weak? Why can't I just be normal?" That voice is part of the problem, not the solution. Instead, practice speaking to yourself as you would to someone you deeply love who's been through something difficult. Of course you learned to hide. It made sense given what you experienced. You were doing your best to survive and belong. And now, you're ready for something different. Start small. Authenticity is a muscle that atrophies from lack of use. You don't start by bench pressing your maximum weight. You start with what's manageable and build from there. Begin with low-stakes situations. Practice expressing a genuine preference, where to eat, what movie to watch, what you actually think about something minor. Notice the discomfort that arises. Breathe through it. Observe that expressing yourself doesn't actually cause catastrophe. Practice numbing your emotions first to yourself, then to safe others. Instead of "I'm fine," try the truth. "I'm actually feeling overwhelmed. I'm sad today. I'm frustrated about this." This simple act of emotional honesty, even in small moments, begins to rebuild the bridge between your internal experience and your external expression. Set small boundaries. Say no to something you'd normally say yes to out of obligation. Let someone be disappointed without immediately trying to fix it. Ask for what you need, even if it feels vulnerable. Each of these acts teaches your nervous system that you can advocate for yourself and survive. Find your people. Not everyone deserves access to your authentic self, especially early in this process when you're still tender and rebuilding trust in your own worthiness. Seek out relationships characterized by mutual vulnerability, acceptance of imperfection, space for the full range of emotions, respect for boundaries, curiosity rather than judgment, consistency and reliability. These relationships become laboratories for practicing authenticity. With safe people, you can reveal more of yourself and experience being seen and accepted. This lived experience of unconditional positive regard begins to contradict the old stories about needing to hide. Consider therapy or coaching support. Having a trained professional help you navigate this territory can accelerate healing and provide the witnessing and validation that's essential for integration. There's no shame in seeking support. In fact, it's an act of profound self-care. Reconnect with your body. Hiding often involves significant disconnection from physical sensation. Practices like yoga, dance, martial arts, or simply mindful movement can help you inhabit your body again, to feel rather than just think, to experience rather than just analyze. Your body holds wisdom that your mind has suppressed. Learning to listen to it, to the tension that signals boundary violation, to the expansion that signals authentic yes, to the contraction that signals danger, provides crucial guidance for living authentically. Engage in creative expression without concern for quality or outcome. Write, paint, sing, build, garden, whatever allows you to express without performing. Creativity is a direct channel to the authentic self, bypassing the critical mind that's been enforcing all those rules about acceptability. Practice discernment about your environment. Some relationships, jobs, or situations may genuinely be incompatible with your authentic self. As you become more yourself, you may need to make changes, not from a place of reactivity, but from clear-eyed assessment of where you can thrive versus where you're constantly having to suppress yourself to survive. This doesn't mean abandoning everyone who knew your adapted self. Many relationships can evolve to accommodate your growing authenticity, but some can't. And choosing yourself, choosing authenticity over belonging, is sometimes necessary. Expect regression and resistance. This work isn't linear. You'll have days where you slide back into old patterns, where performing feels easier than being real, where hiding feels safer than risking exposure. This is normal. This is part of the process. Self-compassion applies here too. Also expect internal resistance. Parts of you develop specifically to keep you hidden and safe. As you begin to reveal yourself, those protective parts may panic. You might experience increased anxiety, intrusive thoughts about catastrophic consequences, or strong urges to retreat. This doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're doing something different, and your system needs time to recalibrate. Celebrate small victories. Each moment of authenticity, each boundary set, each truth spoken, each emotion allowed, these are revolutionary acts. They deserve recognition. Keep a record of these moments. Let them remind you that change is happening, that you're finding your way back to yourself. Finally, remember that authenticity is not a destination but a practice. You're not trying to arrive at some perfect state of unfiltered self-expression. You're cultivating an ongoing relationship with truth, your truth. Sometimes that truth will be messy. Sometimes it will change. Sometimes it will be inconvenient or uncomfortable. And that's okay. That's being human. That's being whole. We've covered a lot of ground together. We've explored how you learn to hide, what that hiding has cost, how to recognize what's been suppressed, and how to begin the journey back to yourself. If you take nothing else from this, please take this. You are not broken. Whatever you've been told, whatever you've believed about yourself, whatever shame you've carried about being too much or not enough, it's not the truth. The truth is that you are a human being who adapted brilliantly to challenging circumstances. You survived. You found ways to maintain connection even when it required sacrificing parts of yourself. And now you get to choose something different. Not because the old way was wrong, but because you've outgrown it. Because the protection that once served you has become a prison. Because you're ready for a life where you're not constantly monitoring, performing, and adjusting to be acceptable. You're ready for a life where you can breathe fully, feel fully, be fully. This journey takes courage. It takes time. It takes patience and compassion and probably a few false starts. There will be moments where authenticity feels terrifying, where hiding feels like the only safe option, where you wonder if it's worth it. It is worth it. On the other side of hiding is a life you can't fully imagine from where you're standing now. A life where relationships feel nourishing because they're based on truth, where creativity flows because you're not blocking yourself, where decisions feel clear because you're connected to your internal knowing, where you can look in the mirror and recognize the person looking back at you, where you finally get to come home to yourself. You don't have to do this all at once. You don't have to be perfect at it. You just have to be willing to take the next small step, to tell the next small truth, to show the next hidden part of yourself to someone safe. And then the next, and then the next. One breath, one moment, one choice at a time, you can dismantle the elaborate infrastructure of hiding you've spent a lifetime building. You can let yourself be seen, not because you've fixed everything that's wrong with you, but because you finally understood there was never anything to fix. You were whole all along, just hidden. And now you're ready to be found.